All right, who's up? Who's here? Let's see. Everybody. Hello, disco, disco. Okay. Lots of stuff. Gotta be CPU issues. It's required with Ableton. Okay. Freeze this really quickly. So basically, anyway, so what I'm going to talk about is making your own sounds with the material you've created for yourself within your music. So basically, utilizing all of your great melodic, melody, and chord writing to create new material from that to use in your current song that you're doing this work within, or to library out and save for usage later. That's mostly what I'm going to be talking about. I don't think most people realize how much potential interesting sound they have within the sounds that they would consider normal and kind of boring within their music and what they're writing. So that's mostly what I'm going to be talking about, is how to create things from material you've already written. Not necessarily any insane synthesis. I don't actually do too much crazy synthesis myself. Most of it is actually audio manipulation. But most of my synth stuff is actually quite simple. Mostly just processing after the fact, layered with that material. That makes it sound more interesting and complex than it actually really is. So that's what I'm going to be talking about here. I'm freezing this. I'm not actually going to be using this. I just was testing and playing around with this before, just for this specific stream. But I'll open up something new here after this, and hopefully we can kind of all sort of engage. And I'll show you what I'm talking about, and then we can hopefully some of you guys can participate in what we're doing and what I'm going to be doing here. And then also hopefully take advantage of this in your own productions, because it's honestly, doing this type of thing, in my opinion, is the key to creating like interesting space and variation music, especially with synths. The most interesting synths are a product of processing and not a product of any crazy synthesis. In my opinion, any crazy sound of mine that you've heard is usually a product of messing with the audio from basic synthesis. Okay. Let's see. I really do not like this ticking. So we're just going to start from scratch here. A lot of I don't actually typically do this in the same sessions I'm making music in. These are separate processes. Save this. Start from scratch. Yeah, this is not a good thing to do if you're if you already have like a pretty complex track build. So anyway, just going to start with some, I don't have a plan for this, by the way, so I have some loose ideas of what I want to do. Everything past that is entirely subject to whatever happens here right now. Let's see. So I'll be doing, everything will be against the basic baseline. Okay, nice and simple. Okay, so basically what we're going to be doing here is I'm just going to use operator, really simple. And we're going to start with a super simple source sound. Basically just a little sine pluck. And we're going to try and make a really interesting chain of processing to take to then later on utilize minor changes in operators to create a bunch of variation from that. So just going to try and come up with some random little melody to play on top of this, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so for this, we're basically just going to have a bunch of separate channels, all of which are going to be doing we're going to be doing a bunch of different things on each of these. But I'm going to start first with just a little bit of wave shaping. So this is just a super pure frequency, basically one single band, very tiny. So there's a lot of possibility here of what we can do to shape things. Basically every one of these, every single one of these is going to affect the sound a little bit differently, and they're all going to be tied to different macros, so later on we can change things and affect the signal further down the line. And it will sound really boring for a while. I'm going to be using pretty default plugins as well. So pretty minor differences between all of these, but will make a difference. Okay, so it's pretty simple, that initial wave shaping. The last thing to set up, which is an important one, is gain staging before all of this. So the reason this is here is because as soon as you start to create distortion and create harmonics, that stuff adds to all overall volume. So further down the line, once you start having a lot of this additional processing, which can create more gain and potentially distortion, you have some simple control at the beginning. You can really avoid any type of nice or nasty clipping or gross stuff that can happen once you have a bunch of summing processing over and over and over again. So it's important to have something beforehand to kind of deal with all this stuff. All right, so we'll just mess with some basic spatial stuff. I'm like, there's a lot of this is all sort of random response stuff. Yeah, I'm seeing everybody. Sorry, I have a tendency to just stare at the monofocus one thing when I'm in here, but I see everybody's messages. If anybody has anything to add or any ideas, just throw it out there, and I can probably do something with it. But the initial part of this will be quite slow, but later on, once we have a bunch of these things built, there's a lot of variation will come out of it. I'm just making each of these channels, they'll sound interesting to themselves, and that's the main goal. I'm more or less just doing random stuff here, and just seeing how it sounds. This is the dry signal here. This is just compressed verb. I don't particularly like the clicking at the top here, so I'm going to get rid of all the high end beforehand. Another channel. Okay. Okay, next one. Maybe we'll do something with delays. Right, like this U-Heat color copy plugin here. I'm just going to compress at the top so you guys can hear everything. I'm just gonna, every one of these, I'm not really, all I'm trying to do is make the initial input signal interesting. I'm not really too concerned about what I did on other channels. I'm just trying to make everything kind of different from one another. Thank you. All right. There's two. I'm gonna make like 4 or 5 of these. Hopefully, and each of them I'm gonna try and have them all sound quite different and independent from one another. So we can then start loop recording and doing things with the input gain, the various gains on each of these channels to kind of create interesting texture, and then we record that stuff and can utilize it with relayering it with everything. So we'll do some stuff with Trash, great plugin. Getting through some presets here. Kind of cool. And all I'm looking to do here is just create some interesting additional harmonics on top of the surprise or the source signal from the synth. I use one of my favorite presets in here, Belgia. You see, as you start to stack these things, you get some really interesting material and texture out of the super simple sound at the top. It's really just this. You hear how everything's changing. I'm gonna make a few more of those, and maybe try and create a couple that are create a bit more interesting harmonics. So I'm gonna do some more distortion and whatnot. Those first 3 are pretty spatial. Try and do some stuff that really warps the sound. There's one plugin I have which I haven't really used too much with music, but it could be interesting, called Wormhole. We'll see what happens with it. Pretty CPU heavy, but we'll find out. Probably going to be a bit too much. Yeah, this plugin might be a bit too thick to use in this thing. I don't want you guys to be listening to a bunch of ticks, so I'm not going to use that. But we'll play around with some other stuff. Play around with vocoder then. So this is almost creating it's kind of making it seem like there's notes that aren't even. It's like it's adding notes that aren't even there. Oh, I do. Vocoder is an amazing plugin. People don't even realize it, or some do, but it's very good. So with this one, I'm actually going to tie more things to the macro that I'm going to be using, just so this one will change more rather than just bringing volume up and down. Some of the crazy sounds in a lot of older tracks of mine are made a lot of usage of vocoder. This one's going to be, a lot of this is going to be on intensity scale. So I think if I had I'm just going to limit this at the end so we don't get our ears blown out here. But this one could get pretty intensive with a lot of input gain. So I'll tie that to the same macro. Not that heavy. All right. Be a bit of high end as well. All right, cool. This one could probably use with some interesting stereo stuff happening, so we'll do a bit more here. Kind of getting a little crazy. Have to dial this back. This is why Unity is really good here, because as you start to do this stuff, just progressively gets louder because you're adding more and more harmonics through distortion and through just basically gaining. All of these different plugins do gaining, like even minor gaining. So you have to keep that in check with some sort of like control or at the beginning. All right. I don't want to see any of this, just that. And this one actually still definitely needs some sort of spatial thing to it. It's a little too dry at the moment. Trying to make texture here, so we're not focusing too hard on making dry signal. We'll link this one with the same macro, but we'll invert it. That way it gets drier as it gets more intense. The nice thing is about distortion this way with reverb is as you pull back the amount of distortion, the reverb tail continues, so you can actually create some really interesting verbed out releases, which can be used later on, reversed, and used as like an effect sound or who knows what. It's the potential for this stuff is you never know what you're going to get. All right, lots of J's. Ooh, Bolda coming in hot with the J's. Bodla. spamming. All right, so now we're at a point, I think, pretty decent time to potentially start resampling this stuff. So we're gonna send the signal, bring in the signal from to here, input record it all, and basically just going to loop record. I'm not in love with this bass line. If anyone has a different bass line idea to go against this, feel free to like shoot the notes in the chat, and I'll put them in here. I don't much attachment to this, but I'm just gonna loop record this stuff now. So now I'm just recording and messing with these various signals and the paths they go down, and when we hear them and when we don't. One thing that might be interesting to do, which is just a secondary thought I had, was to give a bit more rhythm to some of these things. So I'm actually going to put an auto panner on this one here because it's just compressed reverb. I'm going to try and force a bit of rhythm that isn't the same tempo as this stuff either. Or sorry, the same pace. But if I were to put this behind this compressor, kind of creating some rhythm out of the reverb. Okay, so that'll be a useful companion with the dry signal. No, I'm using 10. I'm not using 11. I'm not really quick to upgrade my stuff that much. I usually stay on a older copy for a while. Because I also make so much stuff within 10, I don't want to move to 11 and have potential issues, which has happened before. All right, so more loop recording here. So the idea is, and I'm not totally in love with this yet, but is as you start to manipulate these various channels and record everything, you may serendipitously come across some accidental, interesting little melodies. And from that, you can take those, pull them out, utilize them in interesting ways. And you never really know the kind of ideas doing randomly generating stuff like this will bring forward. Like, you just don't know. So like, who knows how this will sound reversed. Maybe we can use this, double its time, pitch it down a bit. Let's see. That's an interesting little move. I'm just going to continue, just roll it, like cycling over this over and over. Because also another thing is each of these additions, as you're loop recording with them included and you're listening to them, is going to, one way or another, change the way that you're responding to what you're hearing. So this already has a bit of a different mood than what was before. So whatever I would do to these these channel sends will be different because of the new sort of mood that this is made. Even though I haven't actually, this is all super hyper simple. Maybe I'll bring this. Maybe this time I'll bring this all up an octave. See what happens. Okay, there's a couple little things there. I would normally do this for a lot longer, but I don't want to be like sitting here loop recording for 45 minutes playing with plugins, because I don't think anybody's going to get too much from that. But that's usually what I'll do. I'll just do this for an hour and varying everything all the time, constantly recording the entire thing. And you always will stumble upon little nuggets within all of this stuff, and lots of stuff to then utilize. This is all new, original, derivative material of simple music writing. So it's all one, congruent with all the work that you've already done. So anything you do here will most likely harmonically work with everything, unless you're doing some crazy like frequency shifting and other stuff. But oh, who knows? Let's see what happens with this. That's some interesting stereo plucking. Just use easy portal. Portal easy. What is portal? If portal is some plugin that sort of does this sort of thing, I tend to opt away from those things, because you end up discovering interesting combinations of simpler plugins together when you're working this way, I think. Drums as well, yeah. Like, that's the other thing. Don't think, like, this entire chain that you're making is in response to a certain sound. So you can then, off of that, completely change what your input sound is, and you'll have no idea. Like, who knows what could come of it. So actually, I'm going to do that right now, just to feather in a bit more variation here. So I'm just going to opt for some pretty simple synths. Yeah, this is pretty similar. This is pretty similar to any type of like Eurorack synthesis or modular synthesis. It's not much different than this. But now, like, I have a decent rack here, and can now sort of make a synth into this, and it would be a version of a synth you would never make in any other context. And this is such a lame melody. It's not even a melody, it's just a bunch of two notes, for God's sake. Made a slightly different shape synth here, just to use, see what happens with against the in this rack here. I'm not too sure what the I'm not 100% sure what the workflow for this would be within Logic. I'm assuming if you have anything with return channels in Logic, you'd basically just build return things. You could do that. You could do that in Ableton as well. You could route into return channels and use volume this way. Kind of this has turned out interesting. Like, it's not always fruitful, but it's sometimes it is. I'm gonna go back to this other thing that I was messing with for like an hour or two before. It kind of turned out a little bit better, but anyway, like that's sort of like the setup. So I'm gonna, if you imagine that, then I'm gonna open up something else where I did this, and it turned out a little bit more interesting. But it's the same sort of logic, and I'll just do some loop recording. And do these variations into the various channels, and you'll see the kind of material that can come from that. And then also show you this this bed of material I made doing this that sort of kind of levels up basic writing a little bit. But I'll show you once that loads up. Hopefully it's not too laggy. No, I don't ever really use beat repeat high wind. It's most of the time it's just like whatever. Like for me, when I make things, it's pretty reactionary. So it's like whatever I have in there already is kind of where I just respond to that. So if I have a certain rhythm, but no, I don't ever rhythm. I sort of just find with anything with melody is usually a discovery thing for me. I'm not particularly great at just like coming up with melodies. It's not like a strong thing in my skill with my like what I'm good at. But oh, that's cool. Okay, so like this project is basically, as you can see, more or less started exactly the same way. These texture beds were created the exact same way of just So in this particular plugin, or in this particular project file, I'm doing most of this stuff. So you can see here I have this. I have one rack here for mono wave shaping, and then another for spaces. And basically, all of these are a variety of different things. I'm gonna unfreeze, copy this, bring this into the plugin or new project file. We keep this pretty simple. Again, like this is more just, I'm trying to have this more be a framework for everybody. It's just a way of thinking about how you can utilize work you've already done to create additional material from this. What you get out of it is a product of whatever you put into this. It's not really, it's just something, it's a good tool set to use to send ideas into, and from it, you don't know what you're going to get, but there might be lots of interesting little things that come up. There usually are, because just trying to create randomness. I think it will be saved. I mean, for what it's worth. Okay. All right, so this is more or less what I was doing in the last project file, but a little bit better. I spent a touch more time finding and is like doing some bit better melody. It's not 2 notes. So I'll show you all these various. There's a dry one, obviously. And then there's this delay, kind of gives it a bit wider image. And then stereo texture delay. And then this LFO verb, different syncopation. And then just kind of this interesting nonlinear verb. And then I have this feedback thing I did with Saturn, which if I turn up the dry, you'll notice. Yeah, exactly. Layering without layering. So all right, so the idea now is I'm just going to record this as I play with it against a really simple bass line. I don't like that. So I'm just for I hadn't done this in this particular project, but I'm going to set up a utility at the beginning here so I can take advantage of the reverb tails. I don't know what I'm going to get doing this, but there could be something interesting. So that's completely dependent on whatever shaping it into a verse. Yeah, so it's mostly it's just whatever I like, whatever your ear naturally finds interesting, and that's what you end up using in your verse. It's not really some bird's eye view thing. It's more just whatever you find interesting and cool. That's all it is for me. It's not really, there's not much logic behind it other than just following, chasing what I find interesting. So I'm actually going to just quickly set up some quick automation because if you had a MIDI keyboard, or if you had like a MIDI controller with a bunch of knobs, you could link all these things to knobs and use your hands. I don't personally really like doing that, so I'm just going to set up some automation. Okay, so there's one here. There's a bunch of potential material in here. I'm just going to loop record again and play around with some other parts. Who knows what we'll get? I'm going to continue a bit further on this project file, just because it's netting some more interesting material. And maybe we'll see what we can build up with this. Oh, so basically what I'm automating in Saturn is just, is essentially, I have several bands set up here, but I'm literally just automating the frequency on the feedback in a band. So if I change this, you'll see the frequency on the feedback changing, and that's why you're hearing all of that sort of quick, zippy movement. And most of this stuff is harmonically sound, but we'll see what we get. Some of this stuff's kind of cool. Maybe bring in some these other plugins. Maybe do some delay stuff mostly. And it sounds like whale noises. In my opinion, you can't really purposefully engineer interesting sounds. Those are like interesting electronic sounds. In my opinion, those sounds are discovered and are a product of like ordered process. I don't really think this stuff, like, I don't think anyone ever sets out to make some crazy electronic noise or some dubstep sound or whatever. I don't think those things are intended. I think every one of those sounds are more or less accidents, in my opinion. At least that's how I've always ended up arriving at stuff myself, is usually through experimenting. Like I don't know how to say your name. Saying pretty much, yeah. This stuff doesn't really come from like any sort of real logic, other than just like having an understanding of what you're using. So you can see here, there's like a million different things here. I don't know what this stuff's going to sound like, but if I were to then switch this synth here to just go back to the basic arpeggio, turn off some of this stuff, get rid of this gain. It's super simple, maybe a touch of delay. Set it in the back a bit. So we'll just keep it like that. So now we have all these sounds here that we were making. So these are basically here with the type of input volume automation we did. We made stabs. We basically made stabs. So you can look at these. I don't look at these sounds here that we just recorded as finished sounds. These are all just could be a finished sound, but what it is just now it's like sort of medium process. So we can go further with expanding on something we find interesting here, but this is first order of processing, and then now these sounds can be utilized in other ways. So like maybe I happen to like this sound right here. So okay, there's an interesting sort of whale sound here. So I mean, this sound is immediately an interesting riser just by reversing it into something. So it's like, what was this sound prior? It was an arpeggio that we had done a bit of volume automation to. recorded a variety of variation automating certain parameters of plugins in a long signal chain, recorded that, and then have now repurposed it for something else. And even here, it isn't sort of over. Like, I don't even know what this is going to sound like. So that could lead interestingly into that melody, but I'm also going to do further manipulation to this and kind of create more of a riser out of it and just pitch bend it up a bit. That's kind of cool. I'll use the texture mode because I like this sort of stretching sound it gives. When you automate the gain size or the grain size. So it should cut in a bit later, but it's kind of cool. So now I don't know exactly what I'm going to do here, but I'm just going to try and create a sort of texture bed out of some of this material. I'm going to try and use it in different ways. I don't know exactly how it's going to turn out, but each of these things I'm pitching down, pitching up, reversing, whatever. It's already starting to sound some interesting stuff. Yeah, I literally have no idea what's gonna come out of this. That's sort of the fun in it. Maybe yeah, the reverse one sounds pretty cool, and that's just because of the delays. Delays and reverb often sound quite interesting when they're reversed. This has some interesting high end in it, which could be cool. Put down really low to be this nice sort of brightness. So yeah, I'm gonna compress this a bunch. All right, that's kind of cool. So really quickly on this one, but I'm going to do a little bit more, but here is what it was before. And then we sort of just made this texture bed and created all this interesting material. Yeah, I know that plugin, Synplant. I've used it before. I remember using like a really old beta copy of it. I haven't messed with it in a while, actually. I should probably circle back on that plugin. It's a pretty nice synth, if I recall correctly. So let's now I'm just going to I'm going to bring this arpeggio down an octave and just half time the arpeggio. Nothing overly complex here, so now it's just going to be. Same sort of thing. I'm just going to import record this and play around with all of the various processing channels that we made. And now, like, so there's a bunch of this stuff built up. Oh, Doug, I think it's daylight saving times, my man. I think things changed a little bit. Anyway, I'm just going to record this, and so there's two things we could do here. I can either do all of this manipulation to this this sound here with all of that texture stuff that we made, and the bass line, and that will inform the way that we respond and what we do with the with that. It'll be different when you have additional layers. So if I just go back down to the bass line, I'll make the type of material I'll get out of responding to what we're listening to will be different than if I keep the texture going. So this time I'm going to keep the texture going because it might be interesting to make some stuff that is in response to that on top of the bass line. So it can then all sort of work together. We'll see what happens though. All right, so some stuff there. Well, I'm not going to utilize that yet. I'm just going to throw it off to the side here and play around a bit more. All right, so we'll play around with that one. There's a couple of things there as well. You play around. This one could be cool. It kind of has a nice syncopation, so it'll be interesting. We'll see what happens. I like this part. Might be interesting reversed. A lot of these clicks are just because of the really rough sample splicing stuff that I'm doing. Double this one up maybe. Ugly clipping. It's sort of an inevitable byproduct of having this many parallel things happening, but the goal of this is to end up with a bunch of material that all sort of serves to expand what you wrote previously. So if I were to play these basic sounds, which all of this stuff derived from, is what? This basic, really simple respace line in this arpeggio. And then we just made a bunch of these things. I haven't really done much mixing to this, any type of EQing, any type of trying to hunt out where the clicks are happening. It's just material at the moment. Now it's sort of like this. Significantly more interesting. So many plugins. Apologies for all the clicks, but that's sort of the gist of what I'm talking about here. Is we're just making a bunch of derivative material off of really simple writing, and I would imagine that a lot of you, if you weren't sort of familiar with this type of approach to creating new sounds, would think that there was a lot more complex writing of music happening behind all of this, which is sort of the point. That it actually isn't particularly complex. There's some complex processing happening, but that is what's creating the perceived complexity. It's not some really difficult writing that's happening on top of all this. This is just playing around and pulling the interesting bits out of what came about through your exploits of various plugins, and that stuff sort of adds to the overall. But right now, I mean, this is 8 separate notes. I think there might be some notes in the arpeggio that are the same as the bass line, but it's very simple, 6 to 8 notes maximum in this entire thing. But all of this material here was created off of that, and you never would imagine that. Really hate that there's all this clicking. It's going to make this video, wherever this ends up going, quite annoying. But that's the gist of the idea. We have this other thing here that we recorded earlier. We'll see what happens with all of this stuff. It's had some interesting sounds in it. Yeah, so this is pretty similar to the original arpeggio, so it might be nice going up a bit. So there's some other longer form stuff that was recorded. What is this? We can make some really bright, shimmery stuff with this. No, actually, most of the time I don't have CPU issues because I don't actually, when I do this, I don't actually do this in stuff I'm trying to write in. I usually just do this completely independent of tracks. So if there is CPU issues, it's not actually affecting the progress of the song. It's just affecting the current quality of playback. It doesn't actually affect anything else. I don't normally stack the stuff. I just make really long files and catalog all those and then use them later. Or if I have like some interesting sounds that came about in a track that I'm making, I'll like save an alternate session and then isolate those particular tracks and then do this sort of thing to it to create derivative material. I don't know if I like this one. Yeah, it's not working. Really annoying. But yeah, that's sort of the gist of what I'm talking about. Like, I'm going to try and make some effect sounds and other things out of these for a little bit here. See what happens. Because we haven't actually played around with pitching any of this stuff down. There could be some really interesting sounds to be found. So, like, let's see. This is some interesting stuff. That's kind of interesting. Could probably make an interesting like horn out of that. So I'll try and do something with that. Could be cool. We'll see. Yeah. Put a big fat reverb on this thing. One of my favorites. I'll let this one out. Here you go. Called Black Hole. Yeah, man. Pitching down. I haven't even touched on that yet. You never know doing this sort of thing what kind of weird tonal modulation can happen pitching this stuff down. There's the possibilities are truly endless, and you'll get as much out of this as you're willing to explore within it. And there's a lot you will surprise yourself with the kind of material you'll come up with that you wouldn't have come up with trying to come up with it, if that makes sense. A lot of really the most interesting sounds you can think of are usually products of accidents through experimentation. And this approach to experimenting with simple sounds is a good way of creating happy accidents, which is where all of the cool sounds come from, in my opinion. Kind of a cool sound. I could probably, there's a tone in there, maybe like 800 hertz or so. Something that I could boost there. Where is it? Cool. Cool. Try that out. Put some of this stuff within everything else we had done. See what happens. Kind of cool. Relap it a bit. gonna try and find some more stuff instead of starting with just this. Cool. What about these? Kind of cool. I have some Valhalla stuff. I could play with that. Try some Valhalla. Do I have shimmer? I don't have shimmer. Yeah, black hole's a good one. I like vintage verba. We'll see what happens with this. I don't know if any of you guys use Shaperbox at all, but Shaperbox has this cool like time. I don't actually know exactly what it how to describe it. It's this like it's like it almost like grids out the sound. Find it. It's it like with pitching. Where is it? Yeah, here we go. Flipping out there. Cool. Yikes. Yeah, I wish you could hear the payoff. This is ridiculous. Yeah, it's sweating. This it's getting a little too thick here. I'm not going to make any more additional material, but you like I don't know. I think I'm like every little bit you're hearing in this, whatever this has turned into, is deriving from a simple 4-note arpeggio. Like that is it. there's nothing else happening here other than utilizing that to create additional sounds and then to work with those in a creative way. Yes, doing it this way it can be CPU heavy. I also think that's due in part to me streaming all of this stuff and having a bunch of various things running on top of what I would otherwise be doing in isolation. But it is really useful. Yeah, my buffer is pretty high. I mean, there's probably maybe 30 concurrent plugins happening on this track that I'm freezing at the same time. So it is a bit of stuff happening. But yeah, like every single interesting sound that's happened here in this session is just a product of a 4-note arpeggio and playing around with a series of plugins built up in a process chain, and then playing around with how you send your input signal, your simple synth, into that processing chain. And everything in here is a product of that. It's not, and there's no other mystery here. It's just that. Like all of those cool sort of whale sounds. I could definitely make some cool horns out of some of this stuff with some more like precise distortion and reverb work. Could make some interesting horns. Could try and do that. But everything is a derivative of a really simple melody. And it sounds fairly complex, even though it is, but not through any crazy writing on my part. It's just through screwing around, and also screwing around in this very different situation for me, which is showing this stuff. Here, I'll add some drums. Does anybody have any idea for maybe a couple chords that we could put on top of all of this? Because now it's a great point. Like now there's a lot of interesting variation happening. It sounds a lot more complex. Maybe someone has an idea for like a nice simple chord that we could put into this. It would really define what's happening. Because right now it's just a lot of texture, a simple bass line, melodic texture, and a lot of simple bass line, and that arpeggio. But now we could stick a chord into this, or strings. Yeah, strings work really well as well. And some wanker. Great name. Let's see. I'm gonna try and just do like something with a super saw here, but so I'm gonna turn all this down. Getting a little bit cooked. Octave chord. Think. Basic strings. Okay. Mellotron. All right. Turn this down a little bit more. Okay. Get those. There's some pitch bends on the bass line that need to be mapped to the super saw. Sort that out, and then we can think about some other stuff to do. So, like, I'm building some additional things here, but think now with all of this new stuff that we've added, we could actually take the exact same chain of effects that we had created for the arpeggio and add it to any one of these new pieces of material and do the exact same process of affecting input volume into that chain of effects and derive a whole nother boatload of new material to play with and utilize on top of this. And it'll all be working with all of the new additional melodic ideas that you're adding into the fold. I'm not going to do that here because it's obviously disgusting on your CPU and a bit annoying to do while you're in the middle of like trying to build something up. But if this were, if I were just doing like little column response things, like creating a new thing to respond to something and then move the that rack of plugins onto that, you can record a bunch of new ideas. The effects chains. There's only one effects chain in the entire session at the moment, and it is frozen, so it's not actually affecting the CPU. The CPU effect right now is just mostly the sampler. These in 2021 is kind of negligible. I don't know. Is it? You elaborate? Subject 9? I would argue that if you asked 95% of the population what phase even is, they would never even be able to tell you. And those 95% of the population do listen to music. So I don't think they care. I don't think most people care. Is the reality. Maybe let's add some longer lead on top of it. I mean, I'm the 95%. You know, I almost never think about phase. You can tell if phase is weird, and it's obvious when phase is off. But if it isn't obvious, then it doesn't matter, in my opinion. And if it matters, it'll matter to a mastering engineer or something, and they will sort that out rather quickly because it's usually just some simple resets of things. Sort that out. It's usually not an overly complex thing, unless there's something deeply embedded into some portion of someone's production that they completely missed. Usually that stuff's not that big of a deal. Especially electronic music. Most electronic music is quite loud, so, and mono heavy. So what's phase when you're dealing with like the dominant frequencies in a lot of this music is sub bass and low mids. Most of that stuff is essentially near mono anyway, unless they're doing interesting stuff with stereo sub bass. But usually it's all mono. If you're not super comfortable with the compressor and using a compressor to make your sound better in a way of from a mixing perspective, being concerned about phase if you aren't there yet with compression is irrelevant. In my opinion, you should be concerned about like a lot of the core, like deep base foundational principles of stuff rather than being too concerned with whatever the phase situation might be on something. It's not a big deal. I've been doing this a while, and I obviously don't care about hearing slightly annoying clicks and pops and stuff while I'm working. It's just kind of part and parcel for what we're doing here. No, I don't think so. Wow. Yeah, you're totally right about live sets. It's a very important thing when you include music in the context of a space. You're absolutely right there. But I'm just saying from the perspective of like creating music in a DAW, like phase is yeah, I thought we were talking about production here. I didn't know we were talking about live music. That's a totally different thing. And I'm the last person to talk to because I've actually never played any live music ever, period. So, been around some cool people doing that stuff, but I haven't done it myself. I like that. Oh no, no, don't sweat it. The sound is a rabbit hole inherently. We're talking about stuff we can't even see, you know. So it's like it's a difficult thing to speak about at all, you know. But just to add to it, I believe most bass people like say you should keep your sub bass mono is because in those situations where you're in stereo playback and in a live situation, there be no phase issues with your bass frequencies when it's two equal phase signal firing out of your PA. That way, there won't be any weird reaction with the room. It'll just all sum. I think that's the main reason you should try and keep your bass mono. All right, what I'm gonna do here now is there's some decent stuff here. You can see I'm just like throwing paint at the wall, just basically, and seeing what comes of it. There isn't any. Yeah, this is also super freeform here. There isn't even any rhythm here at all as well. I would argue you can. I do a lot of work in Dolby Atmos, and Dolby Atmos uses several different sub bass sources. One at the front of a theater and one at the back. And the distinction between back sub bass and front sub bass in that context is very noticeable. So I don't actually agree with you that sub bass, you can't tell a natural direction to it. I would say you can. I would just say it's a little less specific of pinpointing the direction, but you can get a general sense of the direction, meaning like leaning right, leaning left, leaning front, leaning back. You can sense a direction of bass. It's not necessarily that bass is, it kind of is saying you can notice the direction of bass is kind of implying that bass isn't sound anymore and it's just a feeling, which it isn't. Bass is still sound as much as you notice it through like resonance in your body. But you can tell the direction of bass. You really can. You ever had a neighbor? If any of you live in an apartment, you ever had a neighbor drop something above you? I guarantee you can tell that all of the bass that comes from that is above your head. That's just how it is. Yeah, that's really what it is. But yeah, with surround sound formats, Dolby Atmos has a 0.2 channel, which is two different subwoofer locations. So when you do panning in Atmos, you can actually carry the weight of things into the back of the room versus the front of the room. And that wouldn't work if you could never tell a direction to the bass. You can. If you're in a big venue that has like a massive PA system, yeah, good luck really telling a direction to that sound because it's filling the entire room to an absurd degree that you might as well not be hearing a direction to it. It's just present. It's usually what it is just panning around a sub-harmonic synthesizer is how you generate low end for subwoofer for sub channels. You know what could you use like Waves Low Air, a great subharmonic synth. All right, so I'm going to mute everything and just sort of bring everything in and see how this all, like what every layer is sort of adding to the overall, and we can kind of see how simple the origins of everything here was, and see what it turned into. I mean, I'm not in love with any of this, but I mean, it's cool. Yeah, I think that the directionality thing with sub bass is a myth. I don't agree with it. I don't think it's true, at least from my experience. Like if you were to play a mono sub bass in your headphones and pan it left, are you hearing it on the right side? No, it's because your ear is picking up that sub bass on the left only. You know, It's a bit specific, but that's kind of how it is. Hello, 404. Okay, starting here. Yeah, you're totally right. It's just blurrier in the bass frequencies. It's just not as specific. That's the way I look at it, is like murkier, a little bit blurrier, so it's harder to tell the directionality to it, but there is a direction. I mean, we want to go down this rabbit hole. The reason bass takes up more room is because you're something that's called a Fletcher-Munson curve, which is just like the range of human hearing. You tend to hear higher frequencies at a much louder volume relative to bass. Just the evolutionary thing. No, I haven't. I've barely been to any shows. Wow, it's no, I haven't. I'm sure it would be really cool. Oh yeah. No, I haven't seen that tutorial. I'm just gonna start feeding in all of these layers and kind of see what we get. Yeah, so now like some of these little samples that we had made previously, I'm just adding some different pitching to it, and that making a bit more interesting. Well, yeah, exactly. This sound here has a bunch of ugly low end in it, that like weird stereo low end. That could be some phase conflicting stuff, Loading screen excited music. It is a crazy sound. Don't know how it was made. This is plug-in alchemy right here. It is. Yeah, just like that, Subject 9. That's exactly how it happens. there's a lot of texture on the way. I could try to build something out of this. Certainly, we'll have to see. Usually, what happens is I make these things, and then they kind of inform new ideas, and that it's just a a process of forming new ideas over and over and over again. But let's see here. What's this one do? Yeah, OTT is essentially like OTT is based for electronic music as like nice, warm recording noise in analog music. You know, it's essentially the digital equivalent to that, in my opinion. Like acoustic recordings have a really nice sort of natural air to them, and OTT is just to me is a way of kind of creating the equivalent with electronic sounds, just by pushing the hidden details a little bit more forward. Yeah, MSG. That's pretty good. That's good. I really only use. I don't overly use OTT. Most of the time, I'll just compress high end and boost it a bit. I don't usually use OTT too much. Just kind of quick and dirty. This sound right here has this cool little. This is like one of the arpeggio reversed. Has this nice little melody to it at the end. Ringing is annoying. Cool. We'll get the little effect sound in here. We'll see what all this stuff turned into. All right, so I just Intergalactic Zoo. Yeah. So I turned off all the additional like melody stuff we added, but this is just all the textural stuff that we created off of the arpeggio. Okay, yeah. No, I'm a little ashamed to say how disattached I am from a lot of the happenings in like electronic music. I don't pay a great deal of attention to it. I mean, I see what happens in the bitbird Discord, but I don't spend too much time seeing what's happening outside of that, to be totally honest. Um, I think with Heffy, Doro, I think he took down a lot of the tracks that him and I had made previously. So I don't know what the future is there with doing new music with him. It's fun to make tracks with him, but I think he's still sort of figuring out his own musical direction. So obviously, like those tracks that we did, yeah, I don't think they're on. I don't even think they're on Spotify anymore. Like Walk Star, which was quite the banger, and a few others. I think he took them down. They're still on YouTube, but just other people's uploads. No, I mean I haven't. Here's the thing, like I have a. I'm not. I haven't quit anything, Jay. It's just the LOSI thing is just has always just been a project of mine. It's not really been like a significant musical or like a significant like career direction of my life, right? It's just like this fun little musical thing I've done, still do. The possibility is there that I may put out some more music under LOSI. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. I mean, it's not like the 10 or 12 songs that like ever released with through LOSI are the only songs I've ever made. And I've also made plenty of music since then. It's just music for lots of different things, not just LOSI. Yeah, we'll see. Maybe I'll, maybe I'll, maybe this will turn into something. I don't know. I just have a hard time deciding, or a hard time figuring out exactly what type of stuff I should be making for it. Because like it's all of the LOSI music is just me playing around with production. It's not some like grand vision. That's something I really appreciate about all the people that release music with bitbird. Is all of them have a voice and an image and something to say and a perspective. And with my stuff, I don't have any of that built into my music. It's all just like playing around, production fun for me. It's not too much more than that. Like there's a bit of enjoyment I get out of making like fairly challenging electronic music. I think it sounds challenging. I don't know. It's fun. Um, Plus, not dealing with any vocals, it makes it a lot of room for interesting sounds. You know, a lot of vocals on top of music really reduce amounts of complexity you can have in music. I think one thing all the LOSI tracks are, they do kind of sound difficult, like complex. I think. Yeah, go for it. I'll answer any questions. Really, I'm not too sure how to say that. I'm just gonna say div, or you want to? Yeah, Heart Attack is 100 BPM with a 1/32 arpeggio. Did I record the guitar for Sunday Sunday? I didn't record the guitar. I don't play guitar. I don't have any like specific musical skills like that. I wish I did, but I don't. I really appreciate people like Sander and anyone else that like plays a guitar and sings and uses their voice and puts it out there like that. I don't have those I don't have those skills. Thank you. Yeah. Well, my sessions, I don't ever really. Usually, my final music sessions, I'm just gonna say, um, are predominantly all audio, and if there is any MIDI within it, I freeze it. So in here, the CPU stuff you've been noticing is mostly a product of the fact that I have like a 40 plugin chain thing going on. That's really what's causing the CPU hiccups. But generally dealing with CPU stuff, just pull workload off your CPU by freezing stuff and turning it into audio. Your best bet. Um, yeah. I don't know. Here's the thing is I've never cared to copy leads or copy synth sounds. I don't know if that's. I think it's maybe a healthy exercise to sort of contextualize synths and understand like what they do and how to arrive at sounds. But but I never have never once set out to try and copy the synth sound of someone else, just because it's not really what I don't want to be copying stuff. I want to kind of create my own ideas. Obscure. Do you mean like, is obscure VSTs, is that a company, or are you meaning like obscure VSTs, like stuff people don't generally know about? Oh yeah. If Sander's going over melodies and choruses and stuff, that's going to be a great thing. I'm not wonderful at that stuff. It's because it's so subjective for me. Okay, no, I haven't heard of obscure VSTs. Oh, unknown. Okay, I see. I suppose, honestly, probably not. I've used basic stuff like Fab Filter and Yuhi and Valhalla and Sound Toys and that stuff. Pretty. Um, there's only so much a VST can do. You know, it can either like turn up volume, create harmonics, create space, create delay, or just do some type of odd frequency shifting or spectral work. Like that's really the 5 or 6 avenues that VSTs can do anything. And anything special that's advertised as a special VST that does like crazy sound design is usually just a combination of those things working with each other. What am I making here? A whole lot of derivative sounds from an arpeggio is what every sound in here is just created from a 4-note arp Brent. Everything came from this, Brent. Yeah, I mean that. Like for me, I don't like. I think what happens with that when people are trying to copy leads is they then apply the quality of another song to their own work and think that it means it's the same, but it really isn't. I would just generally opt for like, sure, if you want to copy a lead to understand it, great, but just learn from it and try and do your own thing with it, because copying other people's lead sounds, in my opinion, is not going to make your lead sound something copyable. It's just going to be this thing that someone will say, oh, that sounds like X person's lead sound and not yours. It's like there's an immutable quality to someone's lead sound, which is why you want to copy it, and them arriving at that is not a product of them copying something else, most likely. So do your own thing. It's way more fun. Oh God, I'd have to turn this down to 100 BPM. I don't even know what this sounds like at 100. Heart Attack's 100 BPM. Do a 1/32 arpeggio in this, and that'll be same pace as Heart Attack. Yeah, however you look at it, you can divvy up numbers anyway. Yeah, 1/32 at 100 BPM, or is it 1/16 at 200? Who's to say? It all works. It's all the same. Fast arpeggios. What other? I want to make like a kind of a. I'm going to try and make one more thing out of the arpeggio material, and leave it at that. I want to try and make some like really low fat horn, something to really punctuate the verse every 4 bars. We'll see. We'll see what we come up with, and then I don't know, a million directions we could go from here. Well, yeah, I mean, a drop could be found in this. You never know what could inspire something. Crazy sounds. See what we have here. Actually, this sound over here was kind of a good starting point. Try this, which is the same thing. Try that. That amplifier. I'm not too sure who that is. Um. Well, what are your drums? Well, right here, I'm just like all of this additional stuff we've built here is just kind of I just kind of added. The intention with with this whole session wasn't to create a song; it was to create material to use within songs. Um, like the starting point of this whole thing is just a simple bass line and a super simple arp. So it wasn't really the intention wasn't to like, okay, I'm gonna try and create some future bass song here, and I'm not too sure. It's more just to like create a bunch of material that can then maybe you are working on something else. You can go pull and call from that material, and it adds a different flavor and a different tone and sound to what you're working on elsewhere, and that you wouldn't have arrived at just within that project in isolation. That's sort of the idea here, is to just create a lot of material that sounds interesting off of material that off of other things. That's really just the idea. It's as simple as that. If any of you were to try this on your own, you will eventually, through enough time with playing, create a bunch of material that you otherwise I don't think you otherwise would have expected or made, because you're not trying to write a song here. You're trying to just create interesting material. If you try and separate those two things, you'll end up finding that trying to create interesting material outside of the context of a song can actually add a lot of interesting sounds to the context of a song. Yeah, so like I don't look at music like it's you're trying to make a song every time you open up a DAW. I'm trying to just make interesting sounds, and interesting sounds create interesting music. But if you try and have those two things be the same thing all the time, you'll end up feeling like quite creatively challenged, and like myself included, anybody else I would say that tries to do it all in one place. It's just you kind of like you kind of overload your just overload what you can do. I really find value in separating things out. So creating sounds independent of music is a good thing, in my opinion. It can really create you can really level up the stuff you're doing by separating it and then post rationalizing the sounds you made before into new music. You can find really interesting stuff. If I were to open up some other project file of mine and grab some of these random recordings, who knows what kind of interesting interesting sounds interesting stuff that could add to whatever else you're working on, right? That's the main takeaway I would like for everyone that's still in here to get from this. It's not like this. Doing this is how you make this kind of music. Whatever this is kind of just like beds of like musical beds. There isn't really too much action here. But what we're doing with this material is stuff you can add to other music. But like if I were to just like localize all of this this various material I've come up with and tried to force a song out of it here, I feel it would be very limited. I think the value that comes from doing this is taking this material and putting it into music that has nothing to do with whatever sounds you were chasing in these sessions. That's where that's where the interesting stuff comes. It comes from that. Like I've made an interesting texture bed here, and it's a cool sort of mood. But taking that material and using it elsewhere is where where you'll really discover things, I think. I'm trying to fudge a horn here. Multiverb, that might be fun. No, like you're just chasing what you find interesting. That's all. So like you'll discover things as you have all of these various plugins working in unison, and you end up like doing interesting I don't know if you noticed, but previously, but I was like affecting the input volume into these chains of plugins and just recording all of that. And you end up just finding things. Like there'll be like these little serendipitous bits that you find particularly interesting. And those are the things that you can use elsewhere. Or something, and maybe something you didn't find interesting becomes interesting in some other context. The point is like you're just chasing interesting sounds. You're not like chasing anything with a significant amount of precision. You're just trying to create interesting ideas. Every song, I don't know, is it Yosti? Every single song of mine that's ever been made or released or not released is a product of like stumbling. Because I don't have there's a lot of people that I'm certain you guys listen to that are like great, like creatively great, 2 hours that are like incredible musicians and work really well with just coming up with melodies and chords, and I'm okay at that stuff, but it's not my strong suit. My strong suit comes from like developing material through sound design is what I end up being good at. Like I'm not bad. Like I can write. Usually I work best if I have stuff like that, and I can write chords and write melody against something. So usually I do this type of thing to create interesting textures and interesting tones and things like that, and then I write against those things because then I don't know. I just find it easier to put things together that way. I'm not particularly good at coming up with a really quick, cool, awesome chord progression or something in and of itself. I usually need to be responding to something. Everybody's the king. Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. It's a little crunchy. Trying to make some horn stab. Okay if there's a little crunch to it. I don't know how this is gonna sound. That's a cool sound. Damn, I don't know where that sound came from, but it sounds kind of cool. Maybe we'll try and make a little melody out of that. Audio melodies. That's kind of a cool sound. I don't mind that. We'll see what can come of that. Simple little melody. All right. How long have I been going? Okay, this is like what? Close to 2 hours now? I can probably wrap it up here pretty soon. Because this can just be this can be a rabbit hole exercise. Like if I were to work on this for another like 5 hours, this thing could likely be 50 tracks full of a lot of different interesting sounds, and from that you have 50 different tracks of potential material to use here or elsewhere. And it's already past some sort of quality measure that you've had because you are worked it into some sort of little idea here. You know, like every single one of these sounds I found interesting in and of itself. Like it's strong enough to stay within everything else. So it has a certain quality to it that works. It's past a certain benchmark, right? But sound could be cool. That is a cooked sound, but who cares? Doesn't really matter. Bit ugly bass in here, speaking of phase. Maybe bring that up another. Okay, well, maybe from this we'll try and do some pitch bending to this. Maybe it'll rise up. Sleep is not overrated. It's a good thing to do. Okay, there's another little thing there. This probably a bit too dry, and up front here, use another layer of reverb on this would help it, but yeah, like another thing that hasn't happened here is any type of there's been no refinement to this production at all. It's very just rough, chopped up stuff. But the point is just that technical small stuff, like little clicks on after like loops or replaying, like that's whatever at this point. Like we're just trying to come up with material here. The technical is kind of irrelevant as long as it sounds interesting. Okay, we'll leave that for now. So I could go down another rabbit hole here, and do the equivalent for like bass sounds, because everything I was doing here was mostly spatial. Because you can do the same thing with like basically turning like a low sine wave into like a really interesting like bass sound. With the same sort of approach, just not using spatial effects. Yeah, everything's from one arpeggio. It's 4 notes. It's just what are the notes? Other than like these couple chords I've added, that's it. But yeah, everything came from this arpeggio right here. G sharp, B, D sharp, D sharp. That's it. Everything's from that. You wouldn't guess it, but it is. That's the biggest insight I would like to share with this is just the key to like interesting production is not like usually not a lot of MIDI writing. I mean, it can be, but in my experience, it's usually simple MIDI writing, and then interesting production work on top of it is usually the good way to have something that sounds quite interesting. As I'm sure you all are aware, music by like people like Hans Zimmer is incredibly simple, but it's usually the work that's went into the production and orchestrating the way that simple music sounds is what makes it seem so much more complex than it actually is. And this is the same sort of equivalent in electronic processing and production. It's the same sort of logic. Yeah, like I don't know, like there's some interesting material in this texture bed here. All this stuff. I quite like this. It's kind of cool. Kind of bubbly, kind of fun. There's probably too much happening in this project now too. There's a lot of things stacked as well. I mean, something that would be cool in this is like there's really no sense of time in this. Really, it's just kind of a bed. There's no rhythm, pace to it at all. So you start to do that. But yeah, it sounds very soundtracky. 808. Wow, you're right. Get the classic going here. And for the sound everywhere. would someone do? Would they add like what? Claps? Claps would be a good one, right? Let's grab some claps. People would add claps, right? Clap loop. Yeah, sure. I'm just gonna grab some random stuff. I would build this stuff up elsewhere, but who knows? Yeah, you're totally right, CMDR. Everything in here is truly raw and as recorded. I haven't really done too much to blend anything at the moment. It's just like raw layering. I'm not really trying to build a song here. I'm just trying to create material. So all this material is playing on top of each other because it's all sort of congruent material from the same 4 notes. I'm not trying to really do too much shaping in and of itself here. I'm more just trying to, all of these tracks are different textures and different layers that can be used elsewhere. That's the main point of this. I'm just showing that it's all sort of congruent because it's all coming from the same source, same 4 notes. I'm not trying to build a song. It just happens to work together because it's all coming from the same 4 notes. I mean, the session's clipping, and I'm doing this wearing Apple Apple little white Apple headphones. You know, there's nothing songwriting happening here. It's just sound design. Yeah, this is just to see what happens. It's not really. I'm not trying to arrive at like a finished song. Just material. We'll use that kick drum. I'll try and shape it a bit more if you want. This sound here could be entirely stereo. It doesn't even need any mono. Yeah, speaking of this video, I think whoever is putting together the video should probably cut out the first half an hour because I kind of just, and maybe it's useful, but I kind of just junked together a session to kind of show the initial idea and then opened up something else that I spent a bit more time focusing on. But But yeah, I think anyway, I'm just gonna continue adding little things here, maybe shaping it a bit more. But the other thing that isn't happening here, which would provide a great deal of clarity and a bit more just in the mix in general, is side chaining. Like there's a lot of side chaining in most music that's like this. So if I were to set up a nice little pumping side chain on a lot of this texture stuff, things would start to feel a lot more glued together, which I'll do. Not a big deal. Kind of side chain tempo should we do? Quarter notes. This is usually how I do side chains, by the way. Cool. So all this material here, which is the bit. So once this material is sort of pumping a bit more, it'll sound a lot more glued. Oh, so sidechain compression. I'm just using this this kick drum here as a trigger, and all it's doing is just turning down the volume every time that triggers of whatever settings I put into this compressor. So it's basically just turning down the volume. You'll notice that the volume of this sound here, every time this clip right here, this one I'm zooming in on, this particular one right here plays, it ducks. Look at this visual here, you'll see every time it plays, it ducks. So now, like with that on here, it'll be a bit more consistent. I'm also not paying too much attention to my gain staging here. I realize I'm clipping to hell. So, I mean, and now another thing that we can do is, this is everything in here now is, other than a couple additional synths we added for chords, which is just two things, and that plucking kind of Moog-like synth. Everything is a derivative of that initial arpeggio. And these samples, of course. Yeah, usually what I'll do is if I when I get a synth to Chase, when I get a synth to a point where I like it, I just freeze it and turn it into audio. Because the possibilities of exploiting your simple synth within audio are endless. However, exploiting it as MIDI is particularly difficult, just because you can't isolate anything. It's just a product. Like, plus, I also don't like to keep things in MIDI for too long because of the odd chance, which it has happened, I'm sure, to everybody in here, where a synth resets for some reason, or something happens and it totally torches any of the initial work you did. So I usually tend to freeze stuff just to maintain what I liked originally. And yes, a lot of resampling. This whole thing is resampling, basically. Another thing we can do with a lot of this stuff is actually we've used all this stuff and exploited it in a like a harmonious way. All this stuff is pretty harmonically sound with the music and the bass line it's playing against. We can actually start to make like effect sounds out of all this stuff too. So like, for instance, if we wanted like some sort of like driving riser through all this sound right here could potentially be the perfect candidate. I don't even know what I know what I know what I'm doing will do to this sound, but I don't ultimately know how it will sound. So I know this is going to pitch up 2 octaves over time, but I don't know how this particular sound is going to sound with this done to it. So it will be a nice, could be a nice happy accident. Hard to say. Interesting riser. Kind of a crazy riser. This is me dicking around the same way that you've potentially watched for the last 2 hours for the last decade. This this is it's I don't it's not none of this is really too much a product of I'm not relaying other tutorials to you. This is just experimentation over time. Is all of this. Yeah, listen to all these new sounds. That's a really interesting rising thing underneath of it. That's all coming from a sound that's already musically congruent with the bass line. So the riser sort of has this innate glued sound. It's already, because it's coming from a sound that's a product of something that we're already layering it against. I don't know. I'm not. Who's Boris Blank? No, 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 no. Like the amount of times that I've made Chase, the amount of times that I've made something and completely like changed the key of the song halfway through it or something. It's happens all the time. I would say if you want, like, save what it was previously, like save a new version or something. But go wherever the stuff, whatever you like, wherever this stuff takes you. The best thing I can say is just explore a bit more. Like, nothing I'm doing here, I'm not thinking about any of this over like too much beforehand. I'm not planning anything here. I'm just kind of responding and saving every response. And then this stuff can be used elsewhere. Like this is a great riser right here. If I were to freeze this, and upload it up onto Dropbox and give you guys a link to it, every one of you could put it in your song and it would work entirely differently and have a completely different impression on the music that you're making, even though you saw exactly where it came from and what notes constitute it. So like you could all put this into one of your songs you're working on at this current moment, and it will sound completely different against the base of material it's up against, which is sort of the way I look at this stuff on a large scale. Is the impression these sounds give compared, like, on top of what you're listening to it. Yeah, that's really it. I mean, I don't have any like innate musical ability. Like I couldn't whip up a great melody with like my 8 fingers right now on a MIDI keyboard. I don't really possess that skill. It's something I wish I had, but I don't. So usually, like, what may happen is like I'll do something like this. Maybe I hear something interesting, write a melody against it, and then there's where a cool melody comes from. It didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of a response. I guess that's a good way of putting it. I'm more of a. Some people are some are call, other people are response. I'm more of a response-leaning producer, whereas like a lot of great producers that release music with Bitbird, I know are very much call-leaning producers. They like create from melody, and I usually create stuff from sounds. Yeah, no, I started producing when I was 16, and I'm just turned 27. So that's how long I've been doing this. Yeah, here's that sound. So this is like by any stretch of the imagination, like I would argue that anyone could find use um, with it, find use with the sound. Oh yeah, certainly. I mean, I don't think like I'm just saying I arrive at the same thing in a different way. That's all I'm saying. Okay. Some people get there by just like feeling it out and knowing what they want, and other people get there by playing around and discovering what they like. And for me, I kind of lean towards the latter. So that same riser, I just reversed it and turned it more of into a transient thing, a bit more of an attacking sound rather than a rising sound. Wild brightness. Pretty wild. Yeah. Yeah, it's I don't know what kind of sound that is, and I don't know what it would work well with, but it certainly could work with something, and that would just be something I would just archive and save. All this stuff. There's actually some really cool things in here. You know, lots of cool. I actually quite like this sound here. Or maybe like here's an example. Maybe say now that sound is outside of this Ableton session and sitting in a folder, and you drag this into a new session, and it just exists like this. I'm just gonna consolidate this, but it exists just like this, It's just this sound, and that is all it is. It has some, say now, like maybe we pitch it up 4 semitones or something. Speed it up. Yeah, you really should be sampling yourself. If you look at it, like some people have their voice, other people have some sort of instrument that they're good with, and if you're a person that's sort of like me who doesn't really have those two things, all you really have is the sounds that you make. So if you're constantly, consistently sampling yourself and creating derivative sound from your sound, then you're basically, every time you're working, you're producing more and more material that can be potentially cataloged and used later, used elsewhere, add a different sound, different energy to something else, and you end up, and on top of that, you end up building a giant library. Like the amount of sample packs that I could slam together and sell tomorrow from material I've made this way is ridiculous. I could probably make 20 or 30 of them. Like, just, you end up with a boatload of material, and because your origin point of every sound is entirely different, every bit of material is also different from each other. I would also say that's part of the reason why I have a hard time knowing what whatever the term my sound is. No, I don't know if I'm going to do that, but I could. You know, that the point is like the reason I could is because I make a lot of material and save a lot of material. A lot of people don't do that. A lot of people really think that all this stuff only happens within the songs you're making. But if you separate it, you can end up with a lot of material that is also unique because no one else has it, and no one else had all of the input sounds and input synths and input processing that you decided upon and you chased after. Yeah, yeah. I would personally argue that if you write a cool melody and a cool chord progression and a cool bass line, and throw some drums on top of it, there is no legitimate reason why you should ever need to import effect sounds, impact sounds, any type of glue material within the session. You could create all of that from your musical writing. And then you would have a song made out of sounds that are all from within the scope of that song. So and all of your material for effects and impacts and atmospheric beds and whatever other things you may do are all derivatives of the actual songwriting you're doing. And no one else has that material. So then your music is immediately unique just because the material is 100% your own and coming from your own writing. It's all your own choice. And it's all yours, and no one else has it. Now we're making a totally new song off of some totally new idea, off of some sounds we made with some other previous idea, and you can run this same type of thing through all of this new material in a new key with new tones, and now you have new material again. this is a little bit different. I'm just going to now just try and adapt all this material. Yeah, thanks, subject. It's nice of you. Yeah, that music is I don't know how to describe it. It's just like all that music is a product of me just like really trying to push the production and stuff. It's not really like whatever voice thing you're finding in it is. I think is something you're finding. I'm just trying to make stuff that I find interesting. That's really all it is. Cool. This was up, what, 3 semitones, wasn't it? 3? 4. 4 semitones up. So now, because of all all of this stuff, and like what I would do with all this material, because it came from the same session of a certain key, is I save it as all of that material made in that key. So then I know if I want to bring this into another session that's in a different key, all I have to do is kind of pitch it up various semitones to basically make it work, more or less. Sometimes you might run into some weird chord issues. You know, you may be writing in C minor, and there might be one note for a moment within your material, your resampled material, that might be outside of that. But who cares? Like, I don't. Doesn't matter. Music, chord, like anything to do with like harmony and chords and key is all math, and numbers can be fudged everywhere. So like, I mean, the fact that the term borrowed chord exists just goes to show you how much a chord is irrelevant, whatever the original key is. Like, what even is it if you can just borrow a chord from a key that's different and it still works? Like, what does it even mean in the first place? It doesn't really mean much unless you're required to be writing something to a certain key. Otherwise, it's irrelevant. It's kind of cool. putting my favorite. I'm putting my favorite preset on this lead subject 9, or favorite distortion preset. The harmonics is like the best. Really lifts it. Anyway, different thing. It's something else. Some different thing. A little different, but I was like, here's one. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think there's too much more to expound on here. It would just be even more playing. I'm not really aiming to like produce a song here. These are all just like I'm putting together something that's kind of interesting off of all this material. But it's the intention from this is not to write a song, but it's to just create a lot of material that's interesting. Because I made all of that material I made the second thing out of was derived from something in a different key before, but it sounds different even though it's all the same. So that's really the gist of what I've been working with here for however long it's been. But I don't know. I think you'll all find some really useful ways to exploit your own writing by doing this sort of thing. Depending on the amount of processing you do, it can steer the tone of your music in different directions, which could be cool. Yeah, it really is like it's kind of it's just sketching. It's like creating little interesting ideas in and of themselves, and you never know how that stuff works in aggregate. If there's any other questions, I'm happy to relay some information, but I don't think I'm going to dig too much more into any of this. But yeah, like everything in this track, I'm just going to play it once more, a little bit of it. I'm just going to turn off like the couple additional sounds that I added into this, but everything else here is all just made from a 4-note arpeggio. Oh yeah, that's another thing I should probably say. I have to do all this in 48 because of the streaming, but normally I would do this in 192 or 96, just because of the sample rate. You're able to pitch things in a cleaner manner when you do that. You need to make sure whatever plugins and synths you're using operate at that, but even 48 is fine, really. What do you usually use instead of OTT? You said that's quick and dirty. Just a little bit. I'll still use multiband compression. It'll just be a bit more specific multiband compression with different threshold settings on each. OTT is just a pretty quick plugin. It can quickly even out all of the frequencies and the volume they're playing at. It's pretty useful for that. But sometimes it's hard to contain certain portions because all you can do is adjust gain and whatever the time is. So I'll just use like the multiband dynamics with ozone or something to multiband compress something. It'll be a bit more specific. Well, the thing is here is like I'm not like here. It's kind of aimless, akimbo. It's kind of aimless exploring here. It's not really. I'm not trying to like. It can feel exhausting when you're trying to further move a defined idea along. That's what can feel really exhausting sometimes. But with this, the world's your oyster as far because we're just trying to create little ideas. So it's a little different. If this were like an actual more realized track, I can dealing with the exhaustion stuff is usually time away. I will like if I get to a point where I feel like I can't move anything forward, I usually take 24 or 48 hours away from it, not even listen or think about it. So then you can come back with fresh ears and that is really just a fresh response to your previous work. So usually just time away. Early on, you tend to think that like stepping away from something is like kind of letting something die, or like you're cheating yourself in some way. But in the reality is stepping away from something is giving yourself time to reset on whatever you're thinking about it. So close the session or move on to a different thing and come back to it at another time is my best advice there. Fresh ears is like vital because you'll get exhaustion is stuff can become really monotonous because you're hearing the same shit over and over again, and like tweaking the amount of compression on a vocal is could be like, what does that even mean at a certain point? So you need some time to reset on everything. 1 terabyte is a lot of space. Yeah, I don't know. My system here, I have about 30 terabytes of storage in this rig. Lots of sound. 30 terabytes of available storage. I don't think I'm not using all of that. Probably more like 14 or so. I have a couple. Yeah, no, not internal. I have a couple external RAIDs. Yeah, it's I have one hard drive bay that's 4 terabyte drives. So that's 16 terabytes right there. And then I have a variety of other drives, which probably add up to another 10. So maybe not 30, probably more like 24, but quite a bit. Daily, I back up. I use a program called ChronoSync and have a whole scheduled backup procedure it runs through. Usually does 2 levels of redundancy. So backups of my backups all at the same time. I'm pretty sure I use square waves in Heart Attack. Most of like the big wide synth stuff in Heart Attack is square waves. Pretty sure. Pulse waves are really fun too. They can buzz like crazy. Any offsites? Yeah, I have a quarterly. I have 2 drives that I hook up and back up to and keep them offline in a secure case. But that's mostly my principal work and project files. I don't really save samples that way. Just the derivative work created from all that material. So it's musical sessions, usually, or down audio sessions. Audio takes up a lot of space, especially when you're working in like high formats. Play this quietly. Let's see. How important is it saying no? Like certain decisions, which type of song you're making? I think that depends, Chase, on what the application of it. Like, what's it for? If you're making music for other people, which I do a lot of composing and production for people. The type thing is kind of an important part of the equation. But when you're making music to yourself, type's irrelevant. It should just be whatever type you like. So it just depends. Like if there's money in the equation, then you can't really say no if that's sort of the deal. But if it's just you, or it's you have all the control. Or if you were going to label, they could deny what you do. I think if you're talking about music that you're producing for yourself in your own project, then type is irrelevant and no is whatever is just to whatever you don't like. I think over the years with my stuff and it just in production in general is like I'm sure if you guys recall any of like my some of the older music that I put out, it's very like heavy and it's highly it's very forward in its electronic production, has a lot of energy, it's quite big. I pushed a lot of that music quite hard. It's really big and quite fat and loud. I've had quite a bit of an opinion change on that. Like it's a cool sound and I learned a lot from like going in that direction of trying to make stuff as punchy and as bad as possible. But it's not really the sound I'm in love with too much anymore. I actually quite like trying to make electronic music sound acoustic. It's kind of if I do whenever I do more new LOSI music, it's most likely going to be like the overarching perspective. Production is trying to make like really acoustic sounding electronic music. Mostly with putting synths into spaces, real spaces, natural, like realistic reverberation on digital synths, and doing interesting stuff with that. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, Altiverb's a great plugin. Well, that's the one. Like, that's the one nice thing, Chase, with like doing it this way and isolating it to one particular sound source is so anything that you make off of it always sort of has that hint of the initial input sound. So that way, it's sort of everything that's derived from that is always sort of within a branch of that family, so to speak, like using your words. Um, and then you just exploit that to the maximum, get as much material out of it, and everything you have is more or less fairly similar, just because it all has a common origin. It's when you start like really changing things in a different context I think it is what you're saying. Is when the type thing becomes because it's all sort of like music is all vibe really, so it's not over. If you're using material, if you're pulling from material this way, that's all sort of coming from the same origin. It should all just sort of work together. Um, that's my logic with this stuff. I'm making everything's coming from a simple melody that's of a certain key, so then everything immediately works together just by that alone. And because like all of the processing is coming from like say 3, 4, 5, or 6 different processing chains, um, it can only go so far within whatever sort of measures you built into those, whether they're delays or reverbs or some spectral thing. You can get really crazy with this. I was doing stuff with spatial stuff in this just to kind of create texture and beds for other sounds to sit on top of and make it sound more interesting. But you can go the other way and like do this purely just with distortion or cool stereo imaging or spectral stuff. Like you can go really crazy doing making derivative sounds this way. And And as long as the origin stays the same, it should all be like part of the same family. But if you're speaking larger to like the sound of a project or something, I'm the worst person to talk to about that because I have no idea how that happens. Like I think that comes from like having like a legitimate like perspective, and I just have a perspective in production. I don't really have a perspective in like songwriting. Well, I mean, I look at drums like you can make drums work with any sound because drums are kind of generally non-musical. Like they don't have too much. They don't operate the same in the same sort of way. Um, so, but I mean, like this type, like what this has sort of turned into, this whole thing. Like the sound of that immediately leads my head to like really nice big orchestral drums or something. Like the kind of stuff I have put in a lot of my other older LOSI songs. Um, those types of sounds I just have a certain fondness of. So I would opt to use those sort of things like big taiko drums or big timpanis, stuff like that. Is what I would start to think of here, and or making your own like electronic drums that you send through reverbs and process into nice hits and stuff. Like all of that can all start to sound like taiko's recorded in a room or something. It all ends up starting to sound the same. The other thing is I also wanted to approach showing stuff this way so people wouldn't get kind of overly focused on the specific production of one track. Like I could open up one of any of the song, like any song, like Sunday Sunday or any of those songs, and show you what is happening in there. But that's all so subjective to that particular track that I don't know if it would really be super useful outside of it because arriving at those final songs was not like a plan. No, I mean, I have quite a big fondness of UHeat Pressworks. It's a really great plugin for compression. It's probably my favorite. But other than that, I just use pretty standard Ableton stuff. Drum Bus is fantastic for making really beefing up sounds. I listen to a lot of film music. I like scores, and I also like folk country music. I don't listen to a great deal of electronic music. I was speaking to this guy named Yash yesterday, and he was telling me all about all this new type of like, and he said like future rhythm music and all of this like really kind of making rhythm out of like like melodic, making melodic rhythm music, and like that stuff's all really cool. But I don't know. To me that just all of that music oftentimes just starts to sound like production flexing to me. It's not really particularly enjoyable to my tastes. I like music that's doesn't you wouldn't think this, but the music I prefer to listen to is usually more slowly evolving. Um, that's kind of what I prefer. I would half. I would say I still haven't fully learned any DAW. You're constantly learning. There's no like you never arrive at anything with music. It's a constant process of learning. Yeah, they have really crisp, um, uh, really well EQ'd and saturated drums. They're really nice and punchy. Drulu's drums. It's a testament to the their stuff is a testament to. I'm imagining it's relatively simple. It's probably not a great deal of layering happening, but it's most likely to my ears just really tightly coiled processing on drums. I don't think it comes from a lot of layering of stuff on top of each other. I think it's just really well processed material. Good source sounds. Any other questions? Here, I'll show you the bass patch. It's very simple. This is all the processing on it. Actually, there's no processing. Just pitch bending. This is the preset. Hello, raw haste. No portamento. It's just actually. Oh wait, I might be wrong about that. Yeah, I do have portamento on. It's just pitch bend and portamento. That's it. Yeah, I can do that. Here, let's do that. Here, I'll pitch this sound around, or pan this sound around. You came in a little bit late, raw haste, but I was this is going on 3 hours now. I basically took this sound right here. You can hear it. Very simple arpeggio, and turned that arpeggio into all of this material here. I'm just going to turn off all the stuff that isn't part of it. But every single bit of material you're hearing in this track that I'm playing, or at least what it is all just a product of that simple arpeggio. Do you always keep the sidebar where the folders icons only show? Sometimes, I don't know, it just depends. I'm just keeping it closed here. I mean, just this. I don't know, I know where things are. Yeah, anyway, all of this material here, I'm going to solo it all. It's all just derivative material from that simple arpeggio. So from this to this. A lot of that Super Bandit, a lot of that stuff was a product of like pitching up the recordings up and down and making new little bits out of it. So it's like this sound right here is the same as this sound, except it's playing back at double the speed and reversed. And then I've also done a little bit of shaping to it with reverbs and a couple other things. But basically just making material off of other material. Yeah, sure. I don't know. I always have these programs open. It's usually visible in Discord. Yeah, that's really all I wanted to talk about. I would implore you guys to kind of to experiment with at least the idea of what I've been doing here, not necessarily like copying any random stuff I did here, but to try and exploring like creating sounds from your sounds. Um, because you'd be surprised what type of material you'll get out of it, and you'll also be surprised at how much better it makes your material before sound once it's layered on top of it. Or likewise, bringing that newly derived material into new projects and making it work with it can also totally change what you think was possible with it. And a lot of this stuff doesn't come from synthesis; it comes from tweaking and recording and relayering. Yeah, this will go up on YouTube. I would say the first 30 minutes of this whole thing is probably isn't the best. I'm just sort of setting up the idea behind what I'm doing, and I reopened this project, which had a bit better melody choices. But yeah, that's really the gist of it. You can make a really interesting song or idea of a song out of like really simple origins. So like this song, whatever it is sounds like a lot's happening, but really all it is just playing around with the one melody you're actually listening to. I know it sounds more complicated than it really is. Shaker sound? Which one? There's a lot of little sounds going on here. What do we have here? There's this. Probably this. All right. Well, I think that's really all there's to talk about, unless anybody has any other questions. But yeah, that's really it. I would just encourage you guys to try it. It might be a bit annoying at first, trying to build up all of the different process chains, but at the end, you'll have some great stuff. Well, I mean, as you can see, this session is a mess. I have like the master down by 10, and it is clipping. I'm not really paying too much attention to that stuff. But I would say before anything else, gain staging is number one. You need to make sure your signal's not clipping at any point. I mean, Ableton's okay because most people kind of don't realize how much the 32-bit floating point gain on the master and audio tracks helps, and it doesn't make your clipping obvious, but you avoid going into the red. It makes compression and EQing far less complicated because that stuff usually gets botched as soon as you have hard, loud frequency going into those plugins. So clean gain staging and making sure you're monitoring loud enough so your music is still quiet in production is important. Because a lot of people's production sessions are usually going in the red permanently. And if you ever want your EQ and compression to actually work really well, it needs to be dealing with signal that isn't clipped. You need to invert your levels. So in other words, your tracks need to be quiet and your master needs to be loud. And I'm not saying use something on your master, but you need to be monitoring loud enough so that quiet tracks sound fairly loud and not the other way around, because most people turn up their tracks into their quiet monitoring. Well, most people monitor quiet so their tracks clip. So if you invert it and monitor quite loud so your tracks stay quiet, then you don't have any issue with signal flow screwing up everything you're doing. That helps too. Sometimes if a track starts to get too loud or your ears get tired and you just slowly gain things up, yeah, it's just to globally drop every track down by like 6 dB or something can help. My favorite plugin for mixing, a good well, I mean, mixing isn't a plugin thing. Mixing is a volume over time thing. So if you're, I would say my favorite plugin for mixing is volume automation. No, I don't. I don't ever really do any pre-master stuff. I do a lot of grouping in Ableton, so I end up grouping things into their groups. Or that's what you do, but like into their various uh, instrument groups is what I usually do. So like synths will be all globally grouped and then subgrouped within all of those if there's a lot. But there actually usually isn't any too crazy of synth layering in any of my songs. I usually don't end up. I'd be hard pressed to think of anything that has more than 6 synth layers. Usually more just like swirling melodic stuff. Well, that's well, the thing you're saying it call subject, the stuff you're saying it calls for is yes, it calls for that stuff at the end of the line. But you don't necessarily need to be doing any of that stuff. And you also soft clipping can be done. You can pre-master soft clip a mix before it ever touches your master. So you could have certain aspects, like say it's like a really saturated bass driven um, song that you're producing. It can be soft clipping without actually clipping is the important thing to remember. Like clipping is just there's ugly clipping, which is a master going over 0, which isn't necessarily ugly, but it can be. And then you can clip something that's at -6 by just inputting it at extra 6 or whatever. Um, I mean, I do a lot of work in film and television, so my perspective on mixing is a lot different than pure music mixing, which is why a lot of my tracks end up having like these several minute long sort of bed like bed like this whole track is like multiple bars of like beds of music. Like I like music that sort of evolves slowly over time. So I've usually always you always find that I put like pretty long bridge sections in the middle of tracks in my tracks, just because I like that sort of thing. As far as like what who to learn from, I actually haven't really watched too much on music mixing and all of that. It's been a product of time, which is why like a lot of my older music is like really pushed. It's quite forward and distorted, which was it works because of like that was the sound of the particular tracks. But I would say like through all of that, the most important thing is like really understanding gain staging, because gain staging actually makes doing basic mixing like compression and EQing a lot simpler. Most people that do compression EQ to things have fucked up signal flow, so that stuff really affects what they think these plugins are doing. Yeah, it really does. Um, Mixing is also very much a subjective thing. It's not there. It's not there. It isn't a. It is a technical craft, but it's a subjective technical craft. So it's not like any one thing that I would say or any other thing that some other really popular mixer would say is going to vary massively. Plus, it also depends on the type of genre you're working with. Like some music is inherently highly distorted. So at that point, it's like, what is the mixing engineer if the source material that they're mixing is already technically bad because it's a distorted genre by nature, right? So it really, if anything, it's all just whatever the particular thing you're working on is. It really just depends, and it's a case by case basis. There's no standards or anything, in my opinion. But you get better at mixing by mixing. In my opinion, you don't get better at mixing by watching someone else mix. Like you can, you I don't know. It's like it's weird the way the understanding works with this stuff because you need to fail first to realize what was wrong. So it's like I had many years where I was really into making stuff really big and really loud, and I don't think that's necessarily wrong, but it took doing that for quite a long time to to find what was useful in that, and then pivot. So the best thing I can say is you just need to do it. No, I don't only use Ableton Live. I also use Pro Tools. But for music, I mostly use Ableton. Yeah, gain staging only works if you're monitoring at a healthy volume. So like I do a lot of stuff in film and television, which is all of the mixing in that area is done to reference level standards. Like you're typically mixing against like a negative, like an 82 dB SPL level. Let's say 82 dB SPL, which so at a reference level that would be 20 dB above that. So you're mixing at 102 dB, and the way you monitor never goes above or below 102 dB. You just mix relative to that consistent reference level. So if you're in that environment, gain staging really shows its value because you're monitoring at quite a loud volume. So sounds that may be playing back at negative 40 dB, you can actually hear. And a sound that's playing at negative 3 is actually really big. So you actually can notice the dynamic range difference and mix to it. But when you start to like always push stuff really forward because you're monitoring really quietly, you're no longer doing any mixing because you're not actually like, well, no, yeah, 102 dB is really loud when you're listening to something constantly at 102 dB, right? But when you're mixing a song, you may have one peak at certain points touch 6 dB below 102 dB, but your average is significantly less than that. Your average is probably negative 75, or is probably 75 dB, which is a very healthy range. And you may have like some transients that go above that. But that is when you're in that environment, that's where gain staging actually shows its value because you actually hear gain. But, but most people, when they produce, they have their like Mac volume really low or at half volume, and then they turn all their tracks up so they can actually hear what they're doing. But the reason they can't hear it at a quiet volume is because their gain staging is all screwed up and they don't hear quiet. It's only loud. Or they're listening quiet, so they have to turn everything up to make it sound playback at a healthy volume. That makes sense? I think it should. I guarantee you, most of you would find if you turned your monitoring volume up by 6 to 12 dB and listened to your songs, it would be highly uncomfortable and you wouldn't enjoy it. The reason is because your gain staging is probably royally screwed. Most people don't notice this stuff because the end playback of this stuff is like loud club PAs anyway, so nobody cares. If you look at it that way, gain staging doesn't matter at all. But in my opinion, gain staging matters. No, I pretty much always work on headphones raw hazed. I have monitors, but I don't use them all the time. Sometimes I prefer to listen to stuff without any space. I want to just hear the dry signal in my ears. So headphones are great for that. the room you're working in has an effect on what you do to the sound that you're working with. So sometimes headphones are nice because then you remove that part out of the equation. All right, is that it? Probably. I have always used Sennheiser HD2. What are they again? Yes, Sennheiser HD 280 Pro. So I've been using those for like 7 years. No, pretty much just those headphones, my monitors, and maybe earbuds. That's about it. If I ever check, but generally, if it sounds good on the headphones or on the speakers, it's going to sound good anywhere else. So I don't usually scale. I don't usually go scale down in the size of the speaker I'm listening to, the driver. Yeah, it was long. I don't know. I don't know. I'm sure people will. Well, I'm pretty sure people will get a variety. Hopefully, get a variety of different things out of the stuff I'm saying. Um, but I wasn't trying to just like produce a canned track here. I wanted to just kind of just play around and show some ideas that hopefully you guys can play off of and start doing in your own worlds. Um, no, I mean Rahe's the a DAW is only as loud as the sound you're playing in it. So if Ableton seems loud, it's most likely because you're playing things really loud in it. Um, if you gain state like my so yeah, that's my perspective on mixing, just because of all of the film and television stuff I do, and you work to reference levels in that context. So that usually means you work with speakers that are quite loud, and the material that you're mixing ends up being really quiet. So like, if I were mixing on my speakers, on my monitors with this song, it would most likely end up being like probably not peak too much over -12. Yeah, I'll upload that one riser sound, and I'll drop that in the in the Discord. People can download it. But the rest of it, who knows? Probably just stay in this session. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure I Live Here will have a lot to say about that. Um, master is only as good as the mix that goes into into mastering. So really exploring what you can do with your mix is important, and you can't mix. All of you guys know, like usually when you're submitting stuff for mastering, you can't really peak over like -3 or something, and there's a reason for that. And if you're creating music and it's going over -3, you're not respecting your gain staging that a mastering engineer would require of you. So yeah, all good. Everyone starts somewhere. Like it's you'll get something totally different from this now, and if you were to circle back on what all this stuff a year later, you'd have a completely different perspective on it, because whatever you get from what I'm talking about here is completely dependent on where you're at in production as of now anyway. So every like all the material you'll make is always expandable, because it what you do with the processing is a product of what you know at in the moment. No, I think you just use sausage fattener, subject 9. You just throw that on. That's all you need to do. All right, scratch everything I've said over the last 3 hours. Just throw sausage fattener on your master. You're good to go. Yeah, OTT2. No, you be just to just to circle it back, I'll probably end it here. The like every track of mine that's you guys have heard that's been released is I mastered them all myself too, and the mastering session for that music is remarkably simple. Usually, it's just a touch of multiband dynamics, compression, a touch of EQing, a touch of exciting and limiting, and that's about it. There really is not anything crazy happening. It's very slight, and that's because there's a lot of work in the mix before the master. Well, all right then. I think that wraps it up. Yeah, I'm probably gonna if I do circle back and watch this, I'm probably gonna feel like I was way too long-winded with this stuff. All right, that was fun. Take care, everybody. Thanks for questions and listening to my audio rambling. I think this might be the first time I've really talked with all of you. Thorwald, my man. We should have a chat at some point down the line. I haven't talked with you guys in a while. All right, guys. Take care of yourselves. Be safe, and be really care about what you're doing. It's important. Like explore for the sake of learning. You'll get the most out of all of this stuff by doing that. Try and figure it out yourselves. All right. Take care, everybody.